So who can best provide these security wish lists? Of course, you can look to the United States. It has the armed force. It has the diplomatic, economic resources there. It has also a sort of cultural dominance which comes with it. So you have to maybe pay that price. Okay, stay with nurse for fear of something worse, the Danes. Limited force that Denmark has, but perhaps they've got the right sort, as has been outlined. They have certainly the diplomatic experience and the economic investment in your country. And they've had the cultural links, although perhaps that can be overplayed. Well, Canada has been mentioned. Again, the neighbor, well, why not go to the Canadians and instead of arguing about say, come on, let's sit down and talk about our security in the future. Or you can do it by yourself. You don't have an armed force, you have limited resources, but you do have cultural links through the Inuit Circumpolar Conference. Perhaps you could use that. Let's look at this in perhaps in more detail. And here comes the headline of 51st US state. Well, why on earth would Greenland want this? Well, of course, the economic reasons been outlined. This is the bottom line, if you like. But then, what do you pay for this? Do you pay with your culture, with your way of life? Do you have to give that up? Also, do you have to give up Thule as a bargaining card? Does it not then become an internal US issue, or not one that you can any longer deal with Washington, D.C. on? Of course, it would anyhow be a long process. Look how long Alaska, Hawaii took. Puerto Rico's not even there. And perhaps I think the important thing is that I don't think the United States would really want it. And if they did, perhaps there would be Russian objections. I might also add Canadian objections to that as well. But far be it for me to speak for Canada. So what about the 51st state and the US ambitions here? Yeah, well, they could look at those resources, those possible resources we mentioned. Yes, more oil. They could expand US territory into the Arctic. And I heard last night that actually Senator Jesse Helms, who was a Republican chair of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee in the 1980s, actually did think that Greenland was part of the United States. So why not just color it in anyhow, and if you are part of the Obama administration, then there is the kind hearts bit of wanting to do something about climate change in the region. Why not do it directly? But also the security vacuum. That really what's come down to here, especially if Thule was going to be threatened. What about staying with Denmark? Yes, financial deal here is really central to all this. But you could say, well, the common understandings and history, I could maybe put a question mark by that after hearing what Pia said. And certainly you could deal through Denmark, as is currently done, with the United States, with NATO, almost nowadays dealing directly, as the Danes tend to be fairly hands-off about this. But there is what Lars Emil Johansson called the white state's burden here, a tinge of colonialism here. But maybe nowadays Greenland could set its own agenda on these things. What about the Danes? Why should they want it? History, tradition, yeah, sentiment. But also the presence in the Arctic gives them a seat on the Arctic Council, be it with Greenland. What about that Greenland card? Well, I'd suggest that it's no longer needed because, after all, Denmark has played its role in Iraq and Afghanistan. It doesn't need that Greenland card as it did in the past. I have put in the Canadian option here because, after all, there is the Nunavut there, which was set up in Canada, so maybe why not another Inuit connection there. The language problem can be dealt with, as seen with Quebec, but, well, that's a touchy one. And also we have seen that it's happened in Canada before, with Newfoundland joining in 1949. And of course, it does mean you move the cost elsewhere, but you keep the connection with NATO, possibly the United States. But will the United States like that? Maybe, maybe not. Will the Canadians like it? Well, they get Hans Island at last. So why not go for total independence? You can deal with the United States directly. You can deal with the Arctic Council directly, NATO, United Nations, the whole caboodle there. There is, of course, the danger of a Keflavik of the United States taking up their toy and going home, though I would say that Thule is not Keflavik, and they're likely to stay there for some time. And also, as we've seen, I think there's going to be a lot of extra cost coming in if you want, compared to the extra income you'll get if you become independent. And I refer then to Pierre's presentation about the size. Will you have the people to actually represent this country? Well, you could, of course, buy in outside expertise, even Danish expertise. Why not? So here we come then to the whole question of Greenland's security between the United States and Denmark. What I'd say is that we're seeing here a spread of issues, and a much greater spread of issues than when we look back in history. The spread of issues when it's, whether it's culture, whether it's resources, whether it's environment, or whether it's traditional security, it doesn't matter. These issues now are intertwined, and they are the ones which are connected with any question about Greenland's position today. And the problem is that who you talk to, you get a different one of these issues on the top of their agenda. For Greenland, maybe it's culture and maybe it's resources as well. For the United States, more security balance. Denmark, perhaps environmental resource issues in there, but also security in there. You do certainly have a division of responsibilities changing as well. Change from that tradition of the United States dealing with Denmark, dealing with Copenhagen, to now the United States going through Greenland, going through Nuuk, as well as going through Copenhagen. And you have a variety of forums which are there, and I think the Arctic Council has not had much of a press today, and so certainly it is one that needs to be further considered. And in that, I think we are going to see increased, whatever happens, whichever the answer, so to speak, is gone to, we're going to see an increased demand for a Greenlandic input. And that comes back to a question of resources, of people resources. To what extent can you rely on the people of Greenland being able to represent their own countries in these various forums? And here we come back to a question of training and outsiders. So maybe in the end, that the Danish ambitions and the United States ambitions are going to have to give way a little bit to the Greenlandic needs. And so maybe in the future, it could be that it's going to be the Greenlandic tail which is going to wag either the Danish or the United States dog. Thank you very much.